Here is a scene you might recognize. It is a Wednesday evening. You've just pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store. Or maybe you are already sitting in your driveway. Engine off, bags in the back seat. Your phone is glowing with notifications you don't feel like reading. Nothing is wrong. Nobody is hurt. The day was fine. The week has been fine. By any reasonable standard is fine. And yet you don't open the car door. You just sit there, hands still on the wheel, watching the light drain out of the sky. And you feel this thing. It is not sadness, exactly. It is not anger. It is not anger. It is more like a low hum. A frequency just below what you can name. And it has been playing in the background for months now. Maybe years. And you've been turning up the volume on everything else to drown it out. Work, kids, errands, scrolling, another glass of wine, another project, another Monday. But tonight, in this parking lot, with the engine ticking and the air going cold, the hum is louder than everything else. And it is asking a question you are not sure you want to answer. Is this? Is this all there is? Asterisk. You feel guilty even thinking it. You have a job, a home, people who love you. You've checked boxes that millions of people would kill to check. And here you are, sitting in a parking lot, feeling like something fundamental has quietly come undone inside you and you don't know when it happened. You wonder if you are ungrateful. You wonder if you are depressed. You wonder if something is wrong with you, some flaw in your wiring, some deficiency in your character that makes you incapable of enjoying what you've built. I want you to know something, and I want you to hear it clearly. You are not broken. You are not ungrateful, and you are not alone. What you are feeling has a name, not a clinical one, something older and more honest than that. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life mapping the hidden architecture of the human mind, called it the reversal of life. Midday, the moment when the sun that has been climbing all morning finally reaches its peak and begins to descend, and in that turning everything that worked in the morning stops working. The rules change. The game changes, and nobody told you. He wrote something almost 100 years ago that sounds like it was written for you. Tonight, in this parking lot, asterisk, we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life. This morning for what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. Asterisk here is the thing about that, quote, it is not warning you about failure, it is warning you about success. It is saying, the problem isn't that you didn't get what you wanted. The problem is that you TD, and it wasn't enough. Not because it was too little, but because you've become too large for the container you built. Think of it like a playlist. You've been listening to the same one for 20 years. Ambition, achievement, security, approval. And it used to make perfect sense. Every song had a place. Every track felt like fun yourself, but somewhere around the middle of the album, the music started sounding different. Not bad, just distant. Like you are hearing it through a wall. Like it belongs to someone you used to be but aren't anymore. That is not a malfunction, that is a signal. And if you are wondering why this hits hardest around 40 or 45, or somewhere in that blurry territory where you are too young to be old and too old to be young, there is a reason for that too. It is not random. It is not a click shot. It shows up in the data across every culture, every income level, every country researchers have ever studied. Something shifts in the middle, something biological, something ancient, something that has nothing to do with whether you made the right career choice or married the right person. Your brain is doing something it was always going to do, and the discomfort you are feeling. That is the sound of the software updating. Let's talk about what is actually happening under the hood. For most of human history, you wouldn't be having this conversation. Not because people didn't feel what you are feeling, but because they didn't live long enough for it to matter. Think about that for a second. For hundreds of thousands of years, the average human lifespan hovered somewhere around 30 to 40 years. You were born, you survived, you reproduced, you passed on what you knew, and you died. Often before your children were fully grown, the entire architecture of your psychology, every instinct humming beneath your conscious mind, was engineered for that timeline. And here you are, 43, or 51, or 38 and already feeling the tremor, living 30, 40, maybe 50 years past, the point where evolution had any plan for you at all. We are, in a very real sense, the first generation of humans to routinely outlive our biological programming. We extended the lifespan. We did not extend the instruction manual. Jung understood this before anyone else. He saw that the first half of life, roughly from adolescence to around 40, is governed by what he called Finiture's program, and it is not optional. It is not a lifestyle choice. It is biological firmware burned into your nervous system before you ever had a say in the matter. Here is what nature wants from you in the morning of life: survive, compete, reproduce, establish your place in the hierarchy. Asterisk, that is it. That is the entire assignment. Every anxiety you felt in your 20s about falling behind. Every impulse to compare yourself to your peers. Every late night spent grinding toward the next promotion. That wasn't ambition, that was ancient software, written for the savannah, running on a modern operating system, and the currency nature uses to keep you on task. Dopamine, that little molecule of sin-wanting teen. Not happiness. Wanting the hit you got when you landed the job. The rush when someone acknowledged your work. The buzz of acquisition. The new apartment. The new title. The new relationship. Dopamine doesn't care if you are fulfilled. It only cares that you keep reaching. Jung put it more poetically. He said that in the first half of life, we are essentially fine employees of nature. We think we're remaking free choices, career, partner, city, identity. But most of what drives us is biological gravity. The ego is building itself. The personality is consolidating. You are constructing what Jung called Vivendeed, the container of life tea. And here is the metaphor I want you to hold on to, because it will carry us through everything that follows. Imagine you, V, spent 25 years building a house. Brick by brick, year by year. Your career is the walls. Your family is the roof. Your reputation is the garden. Your social circle is the fence. And by every measurable standard, it is a beautiful house. Solid foundation. Good neighborhood. The kind of house that makes people say, Finday, V really got it together. Asterisk, then one evening, you walk through the front door, and you stand in the middle of it, and you realize something devastating. The house is empty. There is not a single piece of furniture inside. The morning was for building the container. The afternoon is for furnishing it with meaning. And here is the cruel part. The tools you use to build the container are completely useless for furnishing it. You cannot purchase meaning with the currency of ego. You cannot install purpose with the same hands that installed drywall. This is not a metaphor Jung invented to sound poetic. This maps onto something measurable. In 2008, economists David Blanchflower and Andrew Oswald published a study that has since been replicated across 72 countries. They found that human happiness follows a U-shaped curve across the lifespan. It starts relatively high in youth, declines steadily through the 20s and 30s, bottoms out somewhere between 45 and 50, and then remarkably begins to climb again. This isn't tea about money. It isn't tea about health. It isn't tea about whether you got divorced or stayed married. The U-curve appears in wealthy countries and poor ones, in people with children and without, in every demographic researchers have examined. It is, as far as we can tell, a species-wide pattern, as universal as puberty, as predictable as grey hair, and the bottom of the U, that trough in the mid-40s, lines up almost exactly with what Jung described as the reversal of life. As midday, something is happening in the brain during this window that neuroscience is only beginning to understand. The dopaminergic system, that engine of wanting, chasing, acquiring, begins to quiet, not because it is broken, because it is completed its assignment. Nature got what it needed from you. The genes have been passed on, or the window has narrowed, and the biological machine starts to downshift. What begins to emerge in its place is something quieter. The serotonergic system, associated not with wanting, but with buying, not with the thrill of getting, but with the warmth of connecting, not with more, but with soon enough. Your brain is not declining, it is soon reorganizing. The hardware is shifting from a machine optimized for acquisition to one optimized for meaning. And the lag you feel, that strange emptiness, that fog, that sense of being stuck between two versions of yourself, that is not a crash. That is the update installing. The problem is, nobody told you an update was coming. The culture you grew up in worships the rising sun. It has 1,000 scripts for the morning. How to get ahead, how to build your brand, how to optimize your 20s. But for the afternoon, nothing, silence. Avoid where a map should be. So you do the only thing that makes sense. You take the morning S rules and try to apply them harder. More ambition, more goals. More optimization, you buy a nicer car. You chase a bigger title, you sign up for another course on productivity. And every time, the dopamine hit lasts a little shorter, the satisfaction fades a little faster, and the hum in the background gets a little louder. You are not failing, you are applying a morning solution to an afternoon problem, and it will never work. Not because you are not trying hard enough, because the game has changed, and your soul, if you let me use that word without it sounding too heavy, your soul knows it, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Let me tell you something about the life you were handed. Before you were old enough to question it, someone gave you a script. It wasn't written down anywhere. Nobody handed you a document at 18 and said, "Twin here, follow this, IB." But it was everywhere. In the way your parents talked about success, in the way your teachers measured progress, every commercial, every dinner table conversation quietly outlined the shape a good life is supposed to take. The script goes something like this: study hard, get into a good school, find a career, work your way up, find a partner, buy a home, have children, provide, achieve, accumulate. Repeat until, well, until what? That is the part nobody wrote. And then, nothing. A blank page, as if the playwright assumed the story would just sort of end there, but you didn't. End. You kept going, and now you are standing in the middle of that blank page, with all the skills you spent decades sharpening, and none of them seem to apply anymore. The promotion used to feel like a door opening. Now it feels like another room in the same building. The vacations used to feel like escape. Now you bring the emptiness with you and unpack it next to the suitcase. You scroll through photos of your own life and feel like you are looking at a stranger's highlight reel. And the worst part, the part that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, is that you can point to anything that is actually for wrong. There is no crisis, no catastrophe, no dramatic inciting incident. Just this slow, creeping sense that the music has stopped, and you are still dancing because you don't know what else to do. Jung had a word for this. He called it neurosis. But before you flinch at that term, before you picture something clinical and pathological, listen to how he defined it. Because his definition might be the most liberating sentence you'll hear today. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Read that again, slowly. Your anxiety, your restlessness, that nameless ache that sits in your chest at 2 a.m. It is not a disorder. It is not a chemical imbalance that needs to be corrected. It is your psyche doing exactly what it is supposed to do. It is an alarm system, and it is not malfunctioning. It is going off because something genuinely needs your attention. Here is what is happening beneath the surface. For 20 or 30 years, your life force, your energy, your drive, your attention flowed in one direction, outward toward building, achieving, accumulating, proving. That current was strong and clear, and it carried you a long way. But now, in the afternoon, the current wants to reverse. It wants to flow inward, toward depth, toward the parts of yourself you abandoned at the door when you put on your costume for the morning. Performance, and you are blocking it, not on purpose. You are blocking it because nobody ever told you the current was supposed to reverse. So you are standing in the river, legs braced, trying to push the water back the way it came, and wondering why you are exhausted. That blocked energy doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere, so it leaks out sideways, as insomnia, as irritability, as that vague depression that doesn't respond to anything you throw at it, as the sudden urge to blow up your life for no reason you can articulate, as the creeping suspicion that you've been performing a role for so long that you've forgotten whether there is anyone underneath the costume. This is what a midlife crisis actually is. Not the sports car, not the affair, not the impulsive tattoo. Those are just desperate attempts to restart the morning. To chase one more dopamine hit from a system that is already clocked out. The real crisis is quieter than that. The real crisis is standing in your beautiful house, and realizing you don't recognize the person who lives there. Jung called the costume the phi persona, from the Latin word for the masks ancient actors wore on stage. And here is what nobody tells you about the persona. Building one is not just useful in the first half of life, it is feeding necessary. It is how you learn to function in a world that needs you to play a role. The professional, the provider, the reliable one, the strong one. You take the raw, chaotic, contradictory mess of who you actually are, and you carve it into something presentable, something that works. But every piece you carved away didn't vanish. Every impulse you suppressed, every interest you abandoned because it wasn't practical. Every part of yourself you decided was too weird, too soft, too wild, too much. All of it went underground, into what Jung called the Sing Shadow. A vast basement beneath your carefully curated life, filled with everything you decided you could afford to be. For 20 years, the mask fit. It more than fit, it doit swan. You could. Tell where the role ended, the person began. And then, somewhere around the middle of the album, the mask started to itch. Not because it was a bad mask. It served you beautifully, but you've grown, and the mask hasn't. You've expanded in ways you can't even name yet, and the shape you carved for yourself in your 20s is starting to press against parts of you that didn't exist back then, or that you didn't know existed. The afternoon is not asking you to throw the mask away. It is asking you to notice that you are wearing one. Let me come back to you in the parking lot for a moment. Maybe lately you've been doing things that don't feel like you. Cancelling plans you used to enjoy. Lying awake at 3 a.m. with a racing mind and nothing specific to race about. Picking up a book you haven't touched in years. Or staring at a hobby you abandoned in your 20s and feeling a strange pull. Almost like homesickness for a version of yourself you barely remember. You might have noticed a new impatience with small talk. A lower tolerance for pretending. A hunger for something real that you can quite define, but that makes everything else feel like cardboard. These are not symptoms of decline. These are symptoms of something trying to emerge. The energy that used to flow toward the world is now knocking on an interior door you didn't know you had, asking to be let in. The pain you are feeling, that friction, that heat, is the collision between two forces. Your soul trying to turn the wheel, and your hands still gripping it in the old direction. You haven't lost your way. The road has changed, and the old map, the one that got you this far, you can fold it up now, with gratitude, with respect. But you can fold it up, because where you are going next, it can follow. This is the part I need you to stay with me for. Because what I am about to say goes against everything our culture has taught you about pain. We live in a world that treats discomfort as a bug to be fixed. Sad. Here is a pill. Anxious. Here is an app. Lost. Here is a 10-step plan to find your purpose in 30 days. The entire machinery of modern life is designed around one premise. If it hurts, something is wrong, and the goal is to make it stop as quickly as possible. Jung believed the opposite. He wrote a sentence that, the first time I read it, I had to sit with for a long time before I understood what he was really saying. Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. Not useful, not character building. For necessary, asterisk, the way water is necessary. The way sleep is necessary, as if the struggle itself were a nutrient, something your psyche literally cannot grow without. And when it comes to the middle passage of life, that dark corridor between the morning self and the afternoon self, Jung didn't see it as a problem to be solved. He saw it as a process to be endured. Not because suffering is noble, not because pain makes you stronger in some bumper sticker way, but because certain kinds of transformation are only possible in the dark. He borrowed a word from alchemy to describe this, nigredo, the blackening in medieval alchemy, which Jung studied obsessively, not as chemistry, but as a symbolic map of psychological transformation. The nigredo was the first and most terrifying stage of the great work. It was the stage where the base material had to be broken down completely, dissolved, reduced to ash. The alchemists described it as putrefaction, as death, as the black sun, and they understood something that our optimization-obsessed culture has forgotten. You cannot turn lead into gold without first destroying the lead. The old form must be annihilated before the new form can emerge. Psychologically, the midlife negredo is the slow dissolution of the identity you spent decades building, that persona you constructed. The achiever, the provider, the responsible one, begins to crack. Not because it was fake, it was real. It served you, but it was partial. It was a version of you, not the whole of you, and the whole is now demanding its turn. This is why the darkness doesn't respond to the usual fixes. You can optimize your way out of a negredo. You can gratitude, journal your way through an identity dissolution. You can set goals for a self that is in the process of composting. The darkness isn't a sign that you need to try harder. It is a sign that something is trying to side-eye and it needs you to let it. I know how that sounds. Let me make it more concrete. Think about who you've been for the last 20 years, not who you are underneath. Who you've been dying, the role you played, the version of yourself you led with in every room. Maybe it was the competent one, the one who always had the answer. Maybe it was the caretaker, the one everyone leaned on because you never seemed to need anything yourself. Maybe it was the striver, the one who was always chasing the next thing because standing still felt like drowning. That version of you, Jung called it the first half of life, and the hero did its job. It got you through school, through your career, through the 1,000 small and large battles that make up an adult life. It was the sword you needed when the world required fighting. But here is what Jung understood, and what makes this so hard. The hero must die. Not the real you, the tivolu, the timvairo, the armor, the sword, the version of yourself that was built for conquest must be laid down, because the afternoon doesn't require conquest. It requires something the hero was never designed for. Surrender vulnerability. The willingness to sit in a room with yourself and not perform. Ask yourself and Don, rush past this. If I am not my career, who am I? If I am not the reliable one, who am I? If nobody needed me to be anything, who would I be? If those questions make your stomach drop, good. That drop is the feeling of the flaw giving way beneath the persona. And it is supposed to feel like that. Think of a lobster. A lobster grows its whole life, but its shell doesn't grow with it. So periodically, the lobster has to do something terrifying. It crawls under a rock, sheds its entire shell, and sits there, soft, exposed, defenseless, while a new, larger shell forms around it. During that window, it is the most vulnerable it will ever be. Anything could kill it. And yet without that shedding, it would be crushed to death by its own armor. That is you right now. Or that is what is trying to happen to you, if you let it. The shedding feels like falling apart. It is not. It is making room. The itch of the mask. The hum in the parking lot. The 3 a.m. restlessness. The sudden tears at a song you haven't heard in years. The inexplicable pull towards something you can name. These are not symptoms of a breakdown. They are the sound of the shell cracking. And here is the part that changes everything. The part Jung considered the actual swine purpose of the second half of life. He called it individuation. And it is not what you think. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not becoming a better, shinier, more optimized version of who you already are. It is almost the opposite. It is the process of becoming whole, which means reclaiming the parts of yourself you amputated to fit into the morning. Costume. Jung said something about this that stopped me cold the first time I encountered it. Asterisk. I'd rather be whole than good. Asterisk. Think about what that means. Good is what the persona does. Good is meeting expectations, fulfilling roles, being what others need you to be. Good is the mask, but whole. Whole includes the parts that aren't good. The parts that are messy, contradictory, selfish, wild, irrational, hungry for things you were taught to be ashamed of. The afternoon is asking you to meet those parts, not to indulge them blindly, but to acknowledge them, to sit with them, to ask them what they need. That thing that irritates you most in other people, that is your shadow waving at you. That quality you can stand. The laziness, the arrogance, the selfishness. It is almost always a disowned piece of yourself, knocking on the basement door, asking to be let upstairs. You despise laziness in others. Maybe your shadow is begging you to rest. You can stand arrogance. Maybe your shadow is asking you to take up more space. You judge people who are emotional. Maybe your shadow is drowning in feelings you never let yourself have. The afternoon doesn't ask you to become. Your shadow, it asks you to stop pretending it doesn't exist, to stop spending all your energy keeping the basement door locked. Because that energy, the energy of repression, of maintaining the mask, of holding the persona together, that is exactly the energy you need for the second half. And right now, it is all tied up in a war against yourself. Jung student Marie Louise von Franz described individuation as a souvendi opus contra naturam, the work against nature, not against nature in the sense of fighting it, but against the supernatural tendency to stay comfortable, to stay small, to keep wearing the shell even after it is stopped fitting. Individuation is the deliberate choice to step out from under the rock and be soft for a while, to let the old identity dissolve and trust, without evidence, without guarantees, that something larger is forming. It is not a breakdown. It is a shedding. It is not falling apart. It is making room. And what it is making room for is the person you were before the world told you who to be. Except now, that person has 40 or 50 years of depth to bring to the surface. That is not loss. That is arrival. I want to take you back to the parking lot. Same car, same evening light, same grocery bags in the back seat, same phone glowing with messages you haven't. The opened the world outside the windshield looks exactly the same as it did when we started. But something has shifted, not dramatically, not like a movie. There is no swelling orchestra, no sudden clarity, no moment where the clouds part and you see your purpose written in the sky. It is quieter than that. It is more like, you know when you've been holding your breath and you didn't realize it until you finally let it go. And the exhale isn't dramatic. It is just relief. The simplest thing in the world, air leaving your lungs because it was always supposed to. That is what I want to talk about now. The exhale. Because here is what I am not going to do. I am not going to give you a plan. I am not going to give you 5 steps to reinvent yourself after 40, or a journaling template for shadow work, or a morning routine that will unlock your individuation. The internet is full of people who will sell you that, and you already know somewhere in your body that it is not what you need. What you need is something much simpler and much harder. You need permission. Permission to not have it figured out. Permission to be in the middle of something you can name. Permission to let the old version of yourself, the one who always knew the next move, always had a plan, always performed competence like a second language. Permission to let that version soften, not disappear. Soften, the way a fist softens into an open hand. Not because it lost its strength, because it no longer needs to grip so tightly. The first half of life is one long inhale. You spend decades pulling in skills, credentials, relationships, possessions, identities. Everything is about gathering, acquiring, becoming. The lungs expand and expand and expand, and the culture keeps telling you to breathe in deeper, hold more. Let go. Let go. Let go. The second half is the exhale. Not because you are diminishing, because you are releasing. Letting go of what you carried so you can finally feel how strong you are without it. Letting the house be quiet so you can hear what wants to live inside it. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need to leave your partner. You don't need to sell everything and move to a cabin in the woods. Though if that is genuinely calling you, I am not going to stop you. But the transformation the afternoon is asking for is usually less cinematic than that. It is more like a series of small, honest acts. It is saying, finidai, Don. Do you know, when you used to always have the answer? It is sitting with silence instead of filling it. It is picking up the thing you loved at 19 and putting down the excuse for why it is not practical. It is letting someone see you without the costume on, and discovering that you are still there underneath, that you are always there. It is noticing, one Tuesday evening, that the hum in your chest has changed frequency. It is still there. It might always be there, but it doesn't sound like emptiness anymore. It sounds like space, like a room that is being cleared and is waiting patiently for you to decide what to put in it. Not what the world wants you to put in it. What for you want to put in it. What for you want to put in it. Jung spent the second half of his own life building a stone tower by hand on the shores of Lake the Rich. He carved inscriptions into the walls. He cooked on an open fire. He had no electricity, no running water. His colleagues thought he lost his mind, but he wasn't retreating from life. He was furnishing his container. He was filling the house. He spent the morning building with the things that actually mattered to him. Solitude, creation, contact with something older and deeper than the modern world had room for. You don't need a stone tower. You need whatever your version of a stone tower is. And you probably already know what it is. It is the thing that tugs at you when the noise dies down. The thing you keep circling back to in your thoughts, when you are not performing for anyone. The thing that makes no sense on a resume, but makes perfect sense in your chest. The afternoon is not asking you to become someone new. It is asking you to feel and meet someone old. Someone old. The person you were before the script, before the costume, before you learned to trade authenticity for approval. That person didn't die. They just went quiet. They've been sitting in the parking lot this whole time, waiting for you to stop the engine and listen. Here is one more thing, and then I'll let you go. The sun doesn't apologize for setting. It doesn't try to freeze itself at noon. It doesn't panic when the shadows lengthen and the light turns amber and the day begins its slow, inevitable close. It just descends, not with defeat, but with a different kind of dignity, a quieter kind, the kind that comes from having completed one assignment and being willing, finally, to accept the next one. The morning's light was sharp and bright, and it illuminated everything in high contrast. The path ahead, the competition beside you, the summit above. But the afternoon's light is different. It is warmer, softer. It catches things the morning light missed entirely, the texture of a wall, the depth of a shadow, the way a face looks when it stops performing, and just fivvy. And it reveals the stars. You could see them at noon. You can see them now, not because they just appeared, because the light finally got out of the way. That hum you've been carrying, it was never emptiness. It was the sound of the afternoon, waiting for you to arrive. So here is what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not after you've read the right book, or listened to the right podcast, or found the right framework. Right now, in whatever parking lot you are sitting in, literal or metaphorical, open the door, step out into the evening air. Feel it on your skin, but not cold. Look at the sky. Notice how the light does something at this hour that it never does at noon. Something you can quite describe, but can absolutely feel. And then walk inside. Not because you have the answers. Not because the hum has stopped. But because you don't need the answers to begin. And the hum was never the enemy. It was the invitation. The second half doesn't start when something breaks. It starts when you stop pretending nothing needs to change. And you've already started. You started the moment you stayed in the car long enough to hear the question. The afternoon is here. It has been waiting for you, and it holds a kind of depth that the morning, for all its brilliance, could never even imagine. Don't be afraid of the dark. That is where the real furnishing begins. If this felt like a conversation you needed to have, if it named something you've been carrying in silence, you are not the only one. Nim is here for the quiet questions, the ones that don't fit in a headline. Subscribe if you like to keep talking.